It sounds like the Cleveland Browns are going to all but imprison Shedeur Sanders in the football sense of a very talented rookie quarterback who obviously needs reps, needs an opportunity, and who now, barring some miraculous luck, will not get the opportunity to play in a single real game. I'm sure many around the NFL are celebrating as we speak. They are chuckling about this. Many in the NFL wanted to teach Shedeur and his.
You know what's crazy? Right now, at this exact moment, there's a civil war brewing in Cleveland. And I'm not talking about the usual Browns dysfunction we've all gotten used to. This is different. This is owner versus coach, rookie versus rookie, and an entire fan base that's ready to walk away from the team they've bled for their entire lives. Ian Rappaport dropped a tweet earlier today that basically set the NFL world on fire. Jimmy Haslam, the Browns owner, came out and said that 3 games isn't enough to evaluate Dillon Gabriel. Fair enough, right? Except then he added something that has completely divided this franchise. He said Shedeur Sanders is making progress in practice and they want to continue working with both guys. Stop right there. Let's break down exactly what just happened, because this isn't just some throwaway comment from an owner trying to sound supportive. This is a calculated statement that tells you everything about what's really going on behind closed doors in Cleveland. Dillon Gabriel is your starting quarterback right now. He's the guy taking snaps on Sunday. He's the one getting hit, getting pressured, dealing with one of the worst offensive lines in football. And your owner just went on record saying the backup, who hasn't played a single meaningful snap, looks good. Throwing passes in practice with no pass rush, no game speed, no consequences. Do you understand how insane that is from a locker room perspective? You're basically telling your starter that his job isn't secure while praising a guy who's doing the football equivalent of playing on rookie mode. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is what nobody's talking about yet. Jimmy Haslam didn't have to mention Shedeur at all. When reporters asked about the quarterback situation, he could have given the standard owner response. We believe in Dillon. We're committed to his development. We're going to give him the time he needs to grow. That's what every owner says in this situation. But Haslam went out of his way to bring up Shedeur's name, to talk about his progress, to make it clear that both guys are being evaluated. That's not an accident. That's a message. And Browns fans heard that message loud and clear. Social media is absolutely exploding right now, with people calling for boycotts, demanding answers, questioning everything about how this organization operates. Because this isn't the first time Cleveland has completely botched a quarterback situation. This is what they do. This is their specialty. They draft a guy, throw him into an impossible situation with zero support, watch him struggle, then move on to the next one while acting confused about why it didn't work out. They did it to Baker Mayfield, drafted him first overall, surrounded him with just enough talent to be competitive, then pulled the rug out from under him when things got tough. Now Baker's in Tampa making playoff runs, while Cleveland is stuck in this endless cycle of quarterback purgatory. And you're watching it happen again in real time with Dillon Gabriel, except this time there's an added twist, because Shedeur Sanders isn't just any backup quarterback. This is Coach Prime's son. This is a kid who's been in the spotlight his entire life, who played at Jackson State in Colorado, who generated more headlines in college than guys who actually won Heisman trophies. This is a name that sells jerseys, creates buzz, brings attention to your franchise, and that matters more than people want to admit. Let me paint you a picture of what's actually happening in Cleveland right now, because the surface level story doesn't tell you half of it. The Browns went into this season with a 4-man quarterback competition. 4 guys competing for the starting job in training camp. 2 of those guys aren't even on the team anymore. Think about that. Half of your quarterback room from 3 months ago is gone. That's not normal roster turnover. That's chaos disguised as a plan. They brought in Kenny Pickett on day 1 of free agency like he was going to solve all their problems. Former first-round pick, young guy with starting experience. Pittsburgh pedigree, and then he got hurt, contributed absolutely nothing, and eventually got shipped off to Las Vegas for whatever scraps they could get. Joe Flacco was supposed to be the veteran presence, the steady hand who could start the season while the young guys developed. Except Flacco is 40 years old, trying to play behind an offensive line that's been decimated by injuries, and predictably he started turning the ball over like it was his job, so they pulled him, threw Dillon Gabriel into the fire way earlier than anyone planned. And now they're surprised that a 3rd-round rookie quarterback is struggling in a historically bad offense. And make no mistake, this offense is historically bad. One analyst pointed out during a recent discussion that this Browns offense right now is statistically worse than the 2017 Browns team that went 0-16. Let that sink in for a second. The worst team in modern NFL history had a better offense than what Cleveland is putting on the field right now, and somehow Dillon Gabriel is supposed to overcome that with receivers who can't catch, an offensive line that can't block, and a run game that didn't exist until last week when they played a Dolphins team that had completely given up. Here's what really gets me about this whole situation. During that same conversation, someone asked a really important question. They said Joe Flacco goes to Cincinnati and suddenly looks 10 years younger. Two really solid games, including that Thursday night performance against Cleveland, where he basically embarrassed his former team. Same Joe Flacco who looked completely washed in Cleveland. So what changed? Did he magically get better in 2 weeks? Or is he just playing in a functional offense now with actual weapons like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? And if the answer is that Flacco looks better because Cincinnati has a competent offensive system and Cleveland doesn't, then what does that say about Dillon Gabriel's situation? If a 20-year veteran with a Super Bowl ring on his resume can't succeed in Cleveland's offense, how is a rookie third-round pick supposed to figure it out? But that's the thing. The Browns aren't really giving Dillon Gabriel a fair chance. They're throwing him into an impossible situation and then publicly praising the backup who hasn't had to deal with any of it yet. Now let's talk about what happened with the Joe Flacco trade, because this is where you really start to see the dysfunction at the highest levels of this organization. Kevin Stefanski, the head coach, came out after the trade and said he was surprised by it. That's coach speak for "I had no idea this was happening until it was done." And according to Joe Flacco himself, in an interview that came out recently, Andrew Berry, the general manager, called him directly and basically said, "We have an opportunity for you to go to Cincinnati if you're interested." Flacco said, "Sure, if it means I get to play, I'm down." And the trade happened. But here's the key detail that everyone's glossing over. Andrew Berry made that call to Joe Flacco before talking to Kevin Stefanski about it. The general manager traded away the veteran quarterback from the head coach's quarterback room without consulting the head coach first. That's not how functional organizations operate. That's a front office that doesn't trust the coaching staff, or doesn't care what they think, or both. And from Kevin Stefanski's perspective, this trade makes zero sense. You've got two rookie quarterbacks, a third and a fifth round pick, and you just removed the only veteran presence in that room. The only guy who's been through NFL seasons, who understands what these young guys are about to experience, who can help them process what they're seeing on film and in games. Gone for a fifth round pick. From Andrew Berry's perspective, sure, it's good asset management. You get a draft pick for a guy you're never playing again this year. That's smart GMing if you're looking at it purely from a value chart, but from a how do we actually develop these young quarterbacks perspective, it's insane. And it tells you something really important about the power dynamics in Cleveland. Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam are aligned on something that Kevin Stefanski either doesn't agree with or wasn't consulted about. And that something might just be Shedeur Sanders. Think about it. If the front office believes Shedeur is the future, if they think he's got franchise quarterback potential and they just need to bring him along slowly, then trading Joe Flacco makes sense in their minds. They're clearing the path. They're creating a situation where eventually, when Dillon Gabriel inevitably struggles because the offense is terrible, they can make the switch to Shedeur and say we gave Dillon every opportunity, but we have to see what we have in our other young quarterback. It's a clean narrative. It gives them cover, and it sets up Shedeur as the savior coming in to rescue the franchise. But Kevin Stefanski is coaching for his job right now. The Browns are 2-5. The offense has regressed every single year under his watch. He needs wins, and he needs them now. So his timeline is completely different from the front office's timeline. Stefanski needs whoever gives him the best chance to win games this season so he doesn't get fired. The front office is thinking about building for the next 5 years. That disconnect is how you get a situation where the owner is publicly praising the backup quarterback, while the starter is out there dying behind a terrible offensive line. And let's talk about that offensive line for a second, because this is where the entire house of cards falls apart. The Browns have used something like 8 different offensive line combinations through 7 games. 8. You cannot establish any kind of identity when your offensive line is a revolving door of backups and street free agents. Before Jedrick Wills came back from injury, they were playing with 2 backup tackles who had no business starting in the NFL. The interior of the line has been okay when healthy, but they haven't been healthy. And when when you can't protect your quarterback, when you can't establish a run game, when you can't do any of the basic things that functional offenses do, it doesn't matter who your quarterback is. Patrick Mahomes would struggle in this offense right now. But here's what's interesting. Against Miami last week, Nick Chubb got hurt and Kareem Hunt came in and rushed for over 100 yards. He was physical, violent, wearing down the defense with every carry, and people want to discount it by saying take away the 46-yard run and he only had 36 yards on his other carries. Okay, cool, but that's not how football works. You don't just remove the explosive plays and judge a running back on what's left. Those big runs happen because of the work you put in on the earlier plays. Hunt was getting 2 yards, 3 yards, sometimes stuffed for a loss, but he was hitting people, making defenders feel him, softening them up for that big run later in the game. That's old school physical football. That's exactly what you want from a running back. And the Browns were able to do that because they had a lead and the Dolphins had quit. Miami was coming off a short week, playing their backup quarterback completely demoralized. The Browns could just line up and run the ball down their throats. But what happens tomorrow against Cincinnati? What happens when Mike Vrabel's Bengals come in and sell out to stop the run, force Dylan Gabriel to beat them through the air? What's Kevin Stefanski's answer to that? Because if the game plan is run the ball 25 times and hope Dylan doesn't have to do much, and that plan falls apart by the third quarter because they're down 2 scores, then what? Does Stefanski panic and put Dylan in terrible 3rd and long situations? Does he stick with the run even when it's clearly not working? Or does he pick up the phone, call Jimmy Haslam, and say it's time to see what Shedeur can do? That's the question that's hanging over this entire franchise right now. When does Shedeur Sanders get his shot? And here's why that question is so loaded. Shedeur isn't like most 5th-round picks. This kid has been groomed for this moment his entire life. He's Deion Sanders' son. He's been around NFL players, NFL coaches, NFL-level preparation since before he could walk. He played at Jackson State where he had to do everything himself with virtually no talent around him. Then he transferred to Colorado and dealt with the biggest media circus in college football while putting up numbers and winning games. The pressure doesn't faze Shedeur Sanders. The big moment doesn't scare him. He's been preparing for this his entire life. And if Cleveland's offense is already this limited, if they're already this predictable and easy to defend, then maybe Shedeur's ability to create off schedule, to extend plays with his legs, to make something out of nothing, maybe that's exactly what this offense needs. But here's the problem with making that switch too early. If you pull Dylan Gabriel after 3 or 4 starts, you're admitting that you completely screwed up the evaluation process. You're saying we started the wrong guy, we wasted valuable development time, and now we're panic switching quarterbacks like we're playing Madden franchise mode. That's not a good look for any organization, especially one that's already had a decade of quarterback disasters. But you also can't keep running Dylan Gabriel out there if you genuinely believe Shedeur gives you a better chance to win. And that's the impossible position Cleveland has put themselves in. There's no good answer. If they stick with Dylan and keep losing, fans are going to riot. If they switch to Shedeur too early and he struggles, everyone's gonna say they ruined another young quarterback by rushing him onto the field before he was ready. It's a no-win scenario that they created themselves through bad planning, poor roster construction, and a complete inability to build a functional offensive system. Kevin Stefanski is supposed to be this offensive genius. He won Coach of the Year. He's supposed to be this brilliant play caller who gets the most out of his players. But the offense has gotten worse every single year since he took over. It peaked in 2020 with Baker Mayfield under center, and it's been declining ever since. Now it's the most predictable, boring, ineffective offense in football. They run the ball on 1st down, throw a 3-yard pass on 2nd down, and then hope for a miracle on 3rd and 7. That's not a game plan, that's surrender. And here's what's really frustrating for Browns fans. They can see this happening. They're not stupid. They've watched football their entire lives. They know what a competent offense looks like, and this isn't it. But every week they're told to be patient, to trust the process, to believe that things will turn around. And every week it gets worse. The offensive line gets more injured. The play calling gets more conservative. The quarterback play gets more desperate. It's a death spiral, and everyone can see it except the people in charge. So when Jimmy Haslam comes out and says Shedeur is making progress in practice, Browns fans hear that as the owner has already given up on Dillon Gabriel and is preparing everyone for the inevitable switch. And maybe that's not fair to Dillon, who's done everything asked of him, who's taken brutal hits behind that offensive line, who's tried to make something out of nothing with the weapons he has. But perception matters, especially when it comes from the owner. When your boss goes on record saying the other guy looks good, that's not support. That's a warning. And Shedeur Sanders knows this. He's watching all of this play out. He sees Dillon struggling. He sees the offensive line collapsing. He sees Kevin Stefanski running out of ideas. And he's preparing for his moment because that moment is coming. Maybe it's next week. Maybe it's week 10. Maybe it's after the bye. But it's coming. The only question is whether Cleveland's front office has the guts to make the move before it's too late, or whether they're going to wait until the season is completely lost before giving Shedeur his shot. Here's something else that's not being talked about enough. The locker room has to be aware of all this. Players aren't dumb. They see the owner talking about the backup quarterback. They see the offensive line falling apart. They see Dillon Gabriel getting killed out there every Sunday, and at some point veterans are going to start wondering if maybe they should see what the other guy can do. Not because they don't like Dillon, but because they want to win games. They want to make the playoffs. They want to salvage something from this disaster of a season. And once that thought creeps into the locker room, once veterans start talking about maybe we should try something different, that's when you've lost the starter. That's when it becomes impossible to keep running him out there. Because even if you believe in him, even if you think he's the right guy, you've lost the room, and Kevin Stefanski cannot afford to lose that locker room. He's already on thin ice. Another losing season, and he's probably done. So if the players start pushing for Shedeur, Stefanski's gonna have no choice but to make the change. But let's be real about something else. Shedeur Sanders coming in doesn't automatically fix anything. The offensive line is still going to be terrible. The receivers are still going to have drop issues. The play calling is still going to be predictable unless Cleveland makes significant changes to how they operate on offense. It doesn't matter if you have Dillon Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, or a clone of prime Tom Brady back there. This offense is broken at a fundamental level, and swapping quarterbacks doesn't fix that. What Cleveland needs is a complete overhaul of their offensive philosophy. They need to commit to running the ball when they have leads, not just on first down every series. They need to take shots downfield to keep defenses honest. They need to scheme guys open instead of relying on them to win individual matchups. They need to protect their quarterback with better line play and quicker decisions. Those are coaching issues. Those are scheme issues. And until Kevin Stefanski figures that out, it doesn't matter who's taking snaps. But here's the thing about Shedeur that makes this whole situation so fascinating. This kid has been dealing with expectations his entire life. When you're Deion Sanders' son, when your dad is literally Coach Prime, one of the greatest athletes of all time, you grow up with a target on your back. Everyone's waiting for you to fail. Everyone's expecting you to crack under the pressure. And Shedeur has done nothing but exceed expectations at every level. Jackson State, Colorado, now the NFL. He's constantly proving doubters wrong. So when Jimmy Haslam says Shedeur is making progress in practice, maybe he's not just trying to create controversy. Maybe he's seeing something real. Maybe Shedeur is actually outperforming Dillon in every measurable way except game experience. Maybe the coaching staff is coming to Haslam and saying, "Boss, you need to see what this kid is doing when the cameras aren't on." Maybe Shedeur Sanders is legitimately better than Dillon Gabriel right now, and Cleveland is trying to figure out the right time to make that move without completely destroying Dillon's confidence or admitting they botched the entire evaluation process from the start. And if that's true, if Shedeur really is the better quarterback, then Browns fans are about to witness one of the wildest quarterback controversies in recent memory, because this isn't starter versus veteran backup. This isn't established guy versus rookie waiting his turn. This is rookie versus rookie, third round pick versus fifth round pick, with an entire franchise's future hanging in the balance. And the crazy part is, both of these guys could end up being really good NFL quarterbacks. Dillon Gabriel has the arm talent and processing speed. Shedeur has the poise and playmaking ability. In a perfect world, Cleveland would have the luxury of developing both slowly, seeing what each brings to the table, and making an informed decision about who's the long-term answer. But this isn't a perfect world. This is Cleveland. This is a franchise that's been cursed at the quarterback position for 2 decades. This is an organization that drafted 22 quarterbacks since 1999 and hasn't found a franchise guy yet. This is a fan base that's been tortured, disappointed, and let down so many times that they're numb to it. So when Jimmy Haslam comes out and starts talking about Shedeur Sanders making progress in practice, Browns fans don't hear optimism. They hear, "Here we go again. Another quarterback controversy, another season circling the drain, another year of false hope followed by inevitable disappointment." But maybe this time is different. Maybe Shedeur Sanders is actually the guy. Maybe Cleveland finally got it right with a 5th round pick that nobody expected to be anything special. Maybe all that hype, all that attention, all that pressure he's been dealing with his entire life has actually prepared him for this moment in a way that no amount of practice reps or preseason games ever could. And maybe, just maybe, when he finally gets his chance, he's going to prove everyone right who believed in him and everyone wrong who doubted. The next few weeks are going to tell us everything. Watch what Jimmy Haslam says in press conferences and interviews. If he keeps mentioning Shedeur, if he keeps praising his development, that's your signal that the switch is coming sooner rather than later. Watch how Kevin Stefanski calls plays for Dillon Gabriel. If they suddenly start opening up the playbook, if Dillon starts taking more shots downfield, that means Stefanski is trying to give him every possible opportunity to prove himself before it's too late. And watch the locker room dynamics. If veterans start giving non-committal answers about the quarterback position, if you start hearing phrases like, "We just need to figure out what gives us the best chance to win," that's code for the starter is losing support. This isn't just about football anymore. This is about an organization trying to escape decades of dysfunction. This is about an owner who's tired of losing, making decisions that may or may not be in the team's best interest. This is about 2 rookie quarterbacks whose careers might be defined by what happens in Cleveland over the next 2 months. And this is about a fan base that's been beaten down for so long that they're ready to boycott their own team just to make their voices heard. Whatever happens next is going to shape the Browns franchise for years. If Shedeur comes in and excels, if he shows that he's the answer they've been looking for, then Cleveland looks smart for drafting him and patient for developing him properly. But if he struggles, if the offense is just as bad with him under center, then this entire organization looks like a circus that can't evaluate talent, can't develop quarterbacks, and should probably just draft offensive linemen with every pick for the next 3 years. One thing's for certain, this story is far from over. The quarterback controversy in Cleveland is just getting started, and before this season ends, we're all going to find out whether Shedeur Sanders is the real deal or just another name in the long list of Browns quarterback failures. Either way, it's going to be one hell of a ride.